Welcome to the Philosophical Odysseys podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to dig into this today.
Yeah, me too. We spend so much of our time talking about planning. Like the modern approach to a successful life is, well, it's essentially treated like an engineering problem.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a math equation you have to solve perfectly.
Right. You're supposed to map out your career trajectory and you optimize your retirement accounts, you plug all your variables into a spreadsheet, and as long as that line shows a steady compounding upward curve, you're told that you have a plan.
Yeah, and the financial advisor points at the screen and assures you that your future is secure, right? It's a deeply comforting illusion, I think.
An illusion. Wow. But why do we crave that so much?
Well, we have this fundamental psychological need for our futures to be visible and predictable. We want life to be categorized into these neat little check boxes of achievement.
Input equals output.
Exactly. If you get the degree, you get the job.
Yeah.
If you get the job, you get the house. And, if you get the house, you get the happiness.
But then you step out of the spreadsheet and into the actual lived experience of existing.
Right, which is messy.
So messy. You encounter the chaotic, deeply unpredictable reality of being human. And suddenly all those neat projections are entirely useless.
Because you can't put a sudden illness or a breakup into a spreadsheet.
No, you can't. We just find ourselves navigating this crazy landscape of shifting desires, sudden anxieties, and entirely unexpected tragedies.
And frankly, the way most of us try to cope with this murky reality is through what you could call conscious hedonism.
Conscious hedonism, that's a great term.
Yeah, we default to working endlessly to buy the next consumer gadget or chasing the next promotion. We're operating under this assumption that if we just acquire the right configuration of external things, we will finally achieve a state of lasting happiness.
Which, spoiler alert, never actually works.
No, it's a catastrophic miscalculation of human psychology. We are living in a society that provides us with an absolute abundance of diagnostic muddy waters when it comes to figuring out what a good life actually constitutes.
We have so much information, but no real direction.
Exactly. If you look at our societal infrastructure, we have massive, incredibly well-funded institutions designed to teach us how to make a living.
Colleges, trade schools.
Right. But we have virtually no institutions that teach us how to live. We're given the tools to survive and accumulate, but no framework for how to actually experience those things without being consumed by a pervasive sense of emptiness or anxiety.
And that brings us directly to the mission of this deep dive today. Because we're going to explore an ancient, surprisingly practical, and arguably urgent plan for living.
It's incredibly urgent, yeah.
Because the stakes here are not just about having a slightly better Tuesday. Without a coherent philosophy of life, we run the very real risk of reaching our deathbed and experiencing the ultimate tragedy.
Realizing you wasted it all.
Yes. The realization that we wasted our one singular chance at existence on trivial distractions and manufactured anxieties. So today, we're drawing our insights from an extensive exploration of ancient Stoic joy.
It's specifically tailored for the modern reader, which relies heavily on William B. Irvine's comprehensive research on the good life.
Yeah, and for you listening, the learner out there, juggling a million responsibilities, constantly barraged by notifications and demands, this is going to provide a radically different paradigm.
But I want to address the elephant in the room immediately here, because I know the image that flashes into someone's mind when they hear the word stoicism.
Oh, for sure. You picture a robot.
Exactly. You are almost certainly picturing a joyless, rigidly emotionless robot. Someone who just grits their teeth, suppresses their humanity, and bears the endless cane of the world without shedding a single tear.
The ultimate stiff upper lip, like just pathological repression.
Right. But the reality is that everything popular culture has taught us about Stoicism is entirely backward. It is not a philosophy of suppression.
It's actually the opposite, right?
It really is. It is a highly sophisticated, rigorously tested psychological toolkit that was designed by some of the most ambitious people in history to maximize profound, unshakable joy.
I want to spend some real time dismantling that stereotype because the gap between green robot repressing everything and unshakable joy is a massive canyon.
Oh, it's a totally different universe.
So how do we get the translation so phenomenally wrong? Take us back to the origins of this. Where did this entire framework actually begin?
Well, to understand the mechanics of Stoicism, you have to look at the historical evolution of philosophy itself, specifically in ancient Greece.
Okay, take us there.
If we go back to the period before Socrates, the pre-Socratic philosophers like Thales, Anaximander, and Heraclitus philosophy was essentially what we would now classify as early theoretical physics and astronomy.
So they weren't talking about feelings at all.
Not at all. These thinkers were looking up at the stars, studying the tides, trying to deduce what fundamental matter the cosmos was made of. Like, was everything made of water? Was everything in a state of flux?
So they were the ancient astrophysicists, basically. They were concerned with the mechanics of the universe, not the mechanics of the human mind.
Exactly, but then Socrates emerges in Athens, and he initiates a revolution that changes the course of human thought.
The big pivot.
Yeah. The Roman statesman Cicero famously summarized this shift by saying that Socrates brought philosophy down from the heavens and into the cities.
Oh, I love that phrasing. Down from the heavens and into the cities.
It's brilliant. Socrates looked at the pre-Socratics and essentially argued that, hey, understanding the stars is interesting, but it doesn't help a man figure out how to be a good father, a just citizen, or a fulfilled human being.
So he shifted the entire intellectual focus from the cosmos to human nature.
Yes, ethics, character, human nature. He started aggressively asking his fellow Athenians, like, what constitutes a good life? How should a rational creature behave in an irrational world?
And when Socrates was executed, that intellectual spark didn't just die out with him, did it? It exploded into different factions.
It splintered dramatically. His various followers took different aspects of his teachings and founded their own ancient schools of philosophy.
Right. I remember reading about this. You have the Cynics, the Cyrenaics,
the Epicureans, and eventually the Stoics. And we have to strip away our modern definition of a school here.
What do you mean? Like no classrooms and chalkboards?
Right. These weren't academic university departments where tenured professors debated abstract linguistic theory in dusty journals. These institutions functioned much more like immersive life coaching centers.
Or like psychological training camps.
Exactly. That paints a really accurate picture.
It's such a wild concept to imagine today. You could walk through the bustling marketplace of ancient Athens, past the olive merchants and the blacksmiths, and you could essentially shop around for a life coach.
You really could. You could look at the different schools and say, do I want the Cynic package, where I give away all my possessions and live in a barrel?
That's a bit extreme for my taste, honestly.
Or do you want the Epicurean package, where you retreat to a garden with your friends and seek simple pleasures?
Now that one sounds a bit more relaxing.
Right. But people literally sent their children to these schools not to pass a standardized test or to get a credential for a resume, but to acquire a comprehensive operating philosophy for their lives.
So they were learning how to navigate reality.
Yeah. And eventually, out of this vibrant intellectual marketplace, Zeno of Citium founds the Stoic school.
Okay, here we go. The Stoics enter the chat.
Now, the original Greek Stoics were intensely focused on the concept of virtue, and for them, virtue didn't mean puritanical chastity. It meant living perfectly in accordance with nature and absolute reason.
But that shifted later on, didn't it?
It did. A significant shift occurs when Stoicism migrates out of Greece and becomes the dominant philosophy of the Roman Empire.
Right, when we get to the famous names.
Yeah, figures like Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Musonius Rufus adapted the philosophy. They maintained the ultimate goal of virtue, but they recognized that humans need a more immediate, tangible metric for their daily lives.
So what did they replace it with? Or what did they emphasize?
They placed a massive practical emphasis on the concept of tranquility.
Tranquility. See, I hear that word and it still sounds a bit, I don't know, passive. It sounds like sitting by a koi pond doing nothing.
It does sound like that today, yeah.
Why was tranquility the ultimate operational goal for people who were running empires?
Well, we need to define exactly what the Romans meant by tranquility, which requires us to distinguish between lowercase Stoic and uppercase Stoic.
Ah, okay. The adjective versus the actual philosophy.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Our modern lowercase adjectives means being emotionless, grimly bearing pain, repressing your grief, and hiding your anxiety.
Which is just a really toxic form of emotional blunting.
It's terrible for you. But an uppercase Stoic, a dedicated practitioner of the philosophy, defined tranquility in a very specific, active way.
So what is the active definition?
Tranquility is the deliberate absence of negative emotions, specifically the destructive ones like chronic anger, debilitating grief, and paralyzing anxiety.
Okay, but it's not just an absence, is it?
No, it's also the cultivated presence of positive emotions, primarily a deep, resilient joy.
So the goal isn't to flatten your emotional landscape into a barren desert. The goal is to aggressively curate it.
Curate it, yes, that's the perfect word.
You're evicting the terrible tenets, like the anxiety that keeps you up at 3 a.m., the anger that makes you snap at your kids. And by doing so, you're clearing out massive amounts of psychological real estate for joy to actually take root.
And, it highlights a massive structural deficit in our modern world.
How so?
Well, we have universities to teach us coding and accounting. We have religious institutions that provide moral boundaries, thou shalt not steal, be kind to the poor.
Right, the structural pillars of society.
But we have a glaring absence of institutions explicitly teaching us what is actually worth pursuing on a Tuesday afternoon when we're bored, or how to handle the psychological devastation of a sudden job loss.
We're just left completely to our own devices, which is exactly why we default to the conscious hedonism we talked about earlier, of just buying things to soothe our anxiety.
The Roman Stoics recognized this vacuum and filled it with rigorous psychological training.
And what's so incredibly striking to me about these Roman Stoics is that they absolutely were not passive monks hiding away from the world in monasteries.
Not at all.
If you look at the historical resumes of these men, it's staggering. I mean, Marcus Aurelius was the absolute emperor of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, the most powerful man on earth at the time.
Meaning he was managing a sprawling, corrupt bureaucracy, dealing with plagues, and fighting brutal military campaigns on the Germanic frontier.
And Seneca was one of the most famous playwrights of his time, a high-level political advisor to Emperor Nero, and essentially the Roman equivalent of a billionaire investment banker.
And then there's Cato the Younger. He fought fiercely in the political mud of the Roman Senate and eventually led an actual army in a desperate civil war to try and save the Republic from Julius Caesar.
They were not armchair philosophers. They were incredibly active, highly ambitious, deeply flawed individuals operating at the absolute highest levels of power and stress.
We were in the arena, getting covered in dust and blood. But wait, this is where I have to push back a little. If they were so active, if they were literally managing empires, writing laws, and fighting civil wars, how on earth did they stay tranquil?
It's a fair question.
Because, in my experience, the more responsibility you take on, the more your anxiety naturally spikes. My stress levels go up when I have 3 important emails to answer, let alone managing a plague in Rome.
Right. It seems contradictory.
If Stoicism is about tranquility, wouldn't the logical move be to quit your job and move to a cabin in the woods?
You'd think so, but no.
I like to think of human psychology using the analogy of a smartphone's operating system. Most people assume Stoicism is about deleting all the apps.
Deleting the apps. Yeah, I like that.
You delete the ambition app, you delete the love app, you delete the anger app, so the phone just sits there doing nothing and therefore it never crashes. But that doesn't track with how they actually lived.
The smartphone operating system is a highly accurate way to frame this. The Stoics were absolutely not deleting the apps.
So what were they doing?
They understood that the apps, our relationships, our ambitions, our societal duties, are the entire point of having the phone in the first place.
Right. Otherwise, it's just a paperweight.
Exactly. What they were doing was writing and installing a vastly superior underlying operating system. They were installing robust error handling routines.
Okay, error handling. I like the tech analogy.
When a million external notifications and catastrophic events hit the processor all at once, a normal OS freezes and crashes into a panic attack or a fit of rage.
Yeah, spinning wheel of death.
But the Stoic OS categorizes the inputs, isolates the malicious code, and keeps the system running smoothly.
Okay, I want to look at the actual source code of this operating system then.
Well,
let's get into the specific techniques they use to program this tranquility.
Let's do it.
Because the biggest bug in my system, and I think anyone living in a consumer capitalist society can relate to this, is the problem of insatiability. I call it the hedonic treadmill.
The hedonic treadmill is brutal.
It is. We see the new car. We obsess over the new car. We convince ourselves that if we just get the new car, our commute will be blissful.
And you really believe it in the moment.
Completely.
Okay.
So we work overtime, we finance it, we buy the car, and for about 2 weeks, it's amazing.
The new car smell.
Yeah. And then, inevitably, it just becomes our car. It gets a coffee stain on the seat. We stop noticing the new smell. And suddenly, we are looking at an even nicer car on the highway.
We adapt.
We adapt. Get exactly what we want, and our brain immediately calibrates to want something better.
Did the Stoics have a specific protocol to short-circuit that adaptation?
They did. They identified this exact neurological phenomenon 2,000 years before modern psychologists coined the term hedonic adaptation.
That's wild that they saw it that clearly back then.
The brain is fundamentally designed to habituate to its environment. If a stimulus is constant, the brain stops releasing dopamine in response to it.
So it's an evolutionary thing.
Yeah, it kept our ancestors striving for more resources, but in the modern world, it guarantees perpetual dissatisfaction. Okay, so what's the Stoic fix?
The primary Stoic antidote to this biological bug is a cognitive technique called negative visualization.
Negative visualization. That sounds intense.
The underlying logic is profound in its simplicity. Instead of spending your time dreaming of all the things you don't have, you must intentionally and regularly spend time imagining losing the things you do have.
Now, I have to stop you there, because I hear that, and my immediate reaction is that it sounds like a recipe for clinical depression.
A lot of people feel that way initially.
If the secret to happiness is sitting around imagining my life falling apart, how does that not just induce a massive panic attack? Let's break down the mechanics of how they actually did this, starting with what our sources call standard negative visualization.
The key is in the dosage and the intention. Standard negative visualization involves taking a quiet, deliberate moment to vividly imagine losing something you currently take for granted.
Like what? Give me an example.
You imagine losing your job, your partner, your physical mobility, or even your own life.
That's terrifying.
It can be, but you do not ruminate on it. You don't dwell on it to the point of despair. You entertain the thought just long enough to bypass your brain's habituation filter.
So you're tricking your brain, basically.
You are forcing your cognitive systems to recognize that everything you currently enjoy is fragile, temporary, and essentially on loan from the universe.
Okay, so it's a controlled shock to the system.
Precisely. The brain operates on a predictive coding model. When you see your spouse every single day, your brain stops fully processing their presence because it expects them to be there.
They just become part of the background furniture.
Unfortunately, yes. But when you run a counterfactual simulation like, what if I never saw them again? It breaks that predictive loop.
It forces your neural pathways to reevaluate the baseline.
Exactly. When you snap out of the visualization, the result isn't depression. It's a massive surge of dopamine and profound gratitude.
This spouse you were just annoyed with for chewing too loudly suddenly becomes incredibly precious to you.
Because you appreciate them right now, in the present moment, because you viscerally understand they won't be here forever.
That makes a lot of sense. You're artificially lowering your baseline, so reality feels like a massive bonus.
That's a great way to put it.
And then our sources bring up a second type, which I think is a brilliant psychological hack. They call it projective visualization. How does this differ from the standard version?
Projective visualization is used in the heat of the moment when a minor misfortune actually strikes. The goal is to project your misfortune onto someone else to gain objective distance.
Okay, how does that work in practice?
The philosopher Epictetus provided the classic example. Imagine you're at a friend's house, and their servant accidentally drops and shatters a drinking cup.
Okay.
Your immediate response as an observer would likely be calm. You would say, oh, don't worry about it. Accidents happen. It's just a cup. You have objective distance.
Right, because it's not my cup. I don't care.
Exactly. But if it is your favorite cup that gets broken in your own home, the amygdala fires, your ego gets involved, and you might fly into a rage.
Because it's my stuff. My identity is tied to my possessions.
Yes. So the technique is to actively apply the objective distance of an observer to your own life. When your cup breaks, you stop, take a breath, and tell yourself, it's just a cup. If this happened to a friend, I would tell them not to worry. Therefore, I will not worry.
That is so smart. You are intercepting that immediate subjective emotional spike with rational objective framing.
You're stepping out of the first-person perspective and viewing your own life in the third person.
Wow. And then there's the third variation, backwards visualization, which seems to be deployed for the heaviest emotional lifting. This isn't about broken cups. This is about severe, irreversible loss.
Yes. Backwards visualization is utilized when you have already lost something significant and you are trapped in the agonizing cycle of grief.
So what do? Because you can't imagine losing it, it's already gone.
Instead of focusing entirely on the pain of the absence, you force your mind to go backward in time. You imagine a parallel universe where you never had that thing, that opportunity, or that person in the first place.
Oh, wow, that's heavy.
It is. The cognitive goal is to replace the paralyzing grief of the loss with a profound, overwhelming gratitude for the time you did get to experience them.
Our sources provide one of the most moving historical examples of this I've ever read. Seneca wrote an extended letter of consolation to a Roman woman named Marsa.
That letter is incredible.
She had lost her adult son 3 years prior, and she was completely consumed by her mourning. She had withdrawn from society. She wept constantly. Her life was effectively over.
She was stuck in that grief loop.
And Seneca, writing to her, doesn't use empty platitudes. He doesn't say time heals all wounds or he's in a better place. He essentially guides her through a rigorous session of backwards visualization, doesn't he?
It is a masterclass in Stoic cognitive reframing. Seneca advises her to stop lamenting the fact that her son was taken away prematurely.
So what does he tell her to focus on instead?
He challenges her to focus intensely on how incredibly fortunate she was to have had him for the years she did. He reminds her of a brutal truth of the Stoic worldview, which is that we do not own our loved ones.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
It is, but it's essential. We do not own our children, our spouses, or our friends. They are not our property. They are temporarily on loan to us from fortune or the universe or God, however you want to frame it.
He tells her that when fortune eventually knocks on the door and asks for her property back, we shouldn't act like we've been violently robbed by a thief.
Right, because it was never ours to keep.
We should hand it back and be immensely thankful that we were given such a beautiful lease in the first place. We should be grateful for the time the loan was extended to us.
If you look at the mechanics of this, it is remarkably parallel to advanced modern mindfulness practices or the core Buddhist reflections on impermanence.
The parallels are everywhere once you look for them.
By deeply, unflinchingly contemplating the fragility of the present moment and everything contained within it, you strip away the dullness of habit. The present becomes vibrantly alive.
You stop sleepwalking through your relationships and your daily routines.
Exactly.
I understand the theory, I really do. But I'm still struggling with the practical application of this. I have to push back again.
Go ahead.
If I am sitting at a beautiful Sunday picnic in the park with my family, the sun is shining, the kids are laughing, and suddenly I start running a negative visualization. I start thinking about a drunk driver hitting our car on the way home, or someone suddenly contracting a terminal illness.
I see where you're going with this.
Doesn't that immediately rip me out of the present moment? I mean, I'm no longer enjoying the picnic. I'm catastrophizing about a fictional future. That sounds like a surefire way to ruin a perfectly lovely afternoon.
That is the most common critique of this practice, and it hinges on a misunderstanding of how the Stoics applied it. The key distinction is between a flicker of thought and an obsessive rumination.
A flicker.
Yes. The Stoic is not sitting on the picnic blanket hyperventilating, mapping out the logistics of a funeral.
Okay, good, because that would be awful.
They simply allow the thought, like, this could be our last picnic together, our circumstances could change tomorrow, to briefly, lightly cross their consciousness. It is a microdose of perspective.
A microdose. So it's an injection, not an IV drip.
Exactly. And the psychological result of that microdose isn't panic, it is hyperpresence. Because you acknowledge that the picnic is fleeting, your senses sharpen.
Oh, I see.
The potato salad actually tastes better because you are paying attention to it. The sunlight on your skin feels warmer. You actually listen to your children's laughter instead of checking your phone.
It doesn't ruin the picnic. It elevates it from a mundane, guaranteed event to a precious, highly improbable gift.
That's the magic of it.
I like that phrase, microdose of perspective. You're using a tiny drop of perceived loss to cure the chronic disease of taking things for granted.
It's very effective.
But our sources point out that simply thinking about losing things in the comfort of your own mind is only step one in the Stoic toolkit. Step two is a lot more visceral.
Yes, step two is physical.
The Stoics didn't just want you to imagine hardship, they wanted you to physically practice it. Let's talk about the concept of voluntary discomfort.
This was heavily championed by the Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus, who was Epictetus's teacher.
What did he advocate for?
The Stoics advocated for periodically and deliberately injecting minor controlled physical hardships into your daily routine. We're talking about choices that run entirely counter to modern instincts.
Give me some examples of these hardships.
Underdressing on a cold day so you actually feel the chill and shiver.
Yeah.
Choosing to eat plain, stale barley bread and drink only water for a few days instead of your usual rich meals. Opting to sleep on a hard floor instead of your soft, comfortable bed.
Okay, my 21st century brain is screaming at this right now.
I know, it sounds crazy to us.
Human beings have spent thousands of years of technological evolution inventing fire, central heating, memory foam mattresses, food delivery apps, specifically to avoid being cold, hungry, and uncomfortable.
We have engineered discomfort out of our lives.
So why on earth would I willingly subject myself to the conditions of a medieval peasant when I don't have to?
There are two highly strategic psychological reasons for this practice. First, it acts as a behavioral inoculation against future misfortune.
Like a vaccine.
Exactly like a vaccine. Consider the fear of poverty, which drives a massive amount of modern anxiety. People work jobs they hate because they are terrified of losing their lifestyle.
Oh, absolutely, the golden handcuffs.
But if you spend a few days every month eating incredibly cheap, plain food and experiencing a bit of genuine hunger, you realize something profound.
Itches.
You survive. It isn't actually a death sentence. You realize that even if the absolute worst-case financial scenario happens, you are still capable of functioning.
Wow. It's literally exposure therapy.
Yes, it is.
You expose yourself to the thing you fear in a controlled environment, and the amygdala learns that the stimulus isn't actually fatal. It takes the teeth out of your anxiety about the future.
It severely downgrades the threat level. And the second reason is that it radically, instantly renews your appreciation for your current baseline of comfort.
Oh, I bet it does.
When you spend a night sleeping on the hard floor and then you get back into your standard bed the next night, that average mattress suddenly feels like the greatest luxury in the world.
You have reset your hedonic treadmill manually.
Manually resetting it, yes.
Which brings up the concept of fragility. Seneca wrote extensively about what he called the dark side of pleasure. He warned that pleasure is deceitful, didn't he?
He did. He said it's like a wild beast.
If you constantly chase it, feed it, and indulge in it without discipline, it will eventually turn on you and master you. You become its slave. You become utterly incapable of handling even the slightest inconvenience.
And if we translate this to modern society, the implications are staggering.
I mean, think about our modern conveniences. Air conditioning, same-day delivery, endless on-demand streaming entertainment. They are objectively wonderful innovations.
But psychologically, they have made us incredibly fragile.
So fragile. Our high-speed Wi-Fi drops for 3 minutes, we have a total emotional meltdown.
If the food delivery is late, our evening is ruined.
It's embarrassing when you really think about it. By deliberately opting out of convenience, by choosing to be a little cold or a little hungry, you're engaging in the ultimate modern rebellion. You're reclaiming your psychological sovereignty from the tyranny of comfort.
You're building what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragility.
Anti-fragility. I love that. Our sources detail the specific Stoic approach to food, which perfectly illustrates this.
Right, Musonius Rufus talked about this a lot.
He argued that mastering one's appetite was the foundation of all self-control. They would sit down to a meal of plain water and hard bread, and in the act of consuming it without complaint, they discovered a profound secret.
That the mastery of oneself provides a deep, enduring joy.
Yes, a joy that is vastly superior to the fleeting, superficial pleasure of a gourmet meal. The joy isn't in the taste of the bread. The joy is in the conscious realization that you are in absolute control of your appetites rather than your appetites controlling you.
That is the absolute essence of building psychological resilience.
It's the exact same physiological mechanism as going to the gym.
Oh, for sure.
When you go into a gym and lift heavy iron weights, you are engaging in voluntary, unnecessary physical stress. You are literally tearing your muscle fibers. It hurts.
It's uncomfortable by design.
But that voluntary, controlled discomfort forces the body to adapt and grow stronger. Stoic discomfort is essentially a rigorous workout program for the soul.
You are building mental calluses.
Mental calluses, yes. You're building psychological muscles so that when the real heavy lifting of life inevitably happens, like a medical diagnosis or a sudden bankruptcy, your system doesn't snap under the weight.
You are intentionally expanding your comfort zone by stepping outside of it on your own terms when the stakes are low.
All right, so I can control my own comfort levels. I can choose to take a cold shower or sleep on the floor to build resilience. But let's be honest, that only covers a tiny fraction of human existence.
Right. Most of life is not a cold shower.
Most of the massive, impactful events in life are entirely out of our hands. Macroeconomics crash, a global pandemic hits, your company gets bought out, and your irrational boss fires you.
The big stuff.
How does a Stoic philosophy of joy deal with the vast, swirling chaos of a world that is fundamentally uncontrollable?
This brings us to what is arguably the most famous, powerful, and frequently misunderstood conceptual framework in all of Stoicism.
What do you say?
It was most clearly articulated by Epictetus, and it's worth noting here that he spent the first part of his life as a literal slave in Rome. He understood lack of control intimately.
So he lived this. It wasn't just theory for him.
Exactly. We refer to this framework today as the trichotomy of control.
Let's break this down meticulously for the learner, because the standard modern way we think about control is usually a simple binary, right?
Yeah, a dichotomy.
We think of it as there are things I can control and things I can't. If I can control it, I fix it. If I can't, I stress about it. But Epictetus argued that this binary view is flawed.
He argued the binary view is the root cause of our anxiety. He broke reality down into a trichotomy, 3 distinct categories of control.
Okay, what's category 1?
Category 1 contains the things we have absolute, complete, 100% control over. And for the Stoics, this is an incredibly short list.
I would assume so.
What's on it? It consists entirely of our own internal workings, our values, our character, our deliberate judgments about the world, and our internal aims or intentions.
So my conscious thoughts and my moral compass, that's category 1.
That's it.
Okay, imagine category 2 is the exact opposite.
Yes, category 2 contains the things we have absolutely 0% control over.
Like what?
The sun rising, the changing of the seasons, the fundamental laws of physics, the fact that we are mortal and will eventually die, and, crucially, the past. Whatever happened yesterday is completely untouchable.
That makes perfect logical sense. You don't see people standing in their front yards screaming at the sun to stop setting because they intuitively understand they have 0 control over it.
It would be a total waste of energy.
But the problem is, almost nothing that I actually stress about on a daily basis fits neatly into category 1 or category 2.
Nope.
I don't stress about the sun. I don't stress about my internal values. I stress about my job, my relationships, and my health. Where do those fit?
This is Epictetus' stroke of genius. He identifies category 3, which is where 99% of human life actually occurs.
A messy middle.
Exactly. Category 3 consists of things over which we have some control, but not complete control.
Give me a concrete example of how that works in practice.
Let's use the analogy of a tennis match,
Yeah.
or perhaps playing a hand of poker. In poker, you have partial control over the outcome. You control your knowledge of the odds. You control how well you read the other players, and you control the bets you make.
Right.
But you have absolutely 0 control over the cards that are actually dealt from the deck. The outcome of the game is a mixture of your skill and pure, uncontrollable luck.
Okay, so this is the danger zone. Category 3 is where all of our modern anxiety lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Because our brain recognizes that we can influence the outcome, so we obsess over it. But we also secretly know we can't guarantee it, which creates this low-level terror. What is the Stoic hack for operating in category 3 without losing your mind?
The psychological hack is a technique called internalizing your goals.
Internalizing goals.
Yes. The vast majority of people set external goals in category 3. Their goal is, I must win this tennis match, or I must get this specific promotion.
Which is normal, right? That's what we're taught to do.
It is, but by setting a goal that relies on variables outside of their complete control, they are winningly handing their tranquility over to chance. They will be immensely anxious before the match and psychologically devastated if they lose.
So they've rigged the game against their own mental health.
The Stoic realizes this is a terrible bet. So they shift the goalposts. They move their goal from the external outcome, which is category 3, entirely into the internal effort, which is category 1.
Let me make sure I'm grasping the mechanics of this. If I'm the tennis player, my goal is no longer win the match. I have to completely abandon that as my primary metric of success.
That's right.
My new goal becomes, I will play to the absolute best of my physical ability today. I will control my temper if I miss a shot. I will execute the strategy my coach and I developed.
That is exactly the shift. You internalize the goal. And look at the psychological result of that shift. If you step onto the court, you play your absolute heart out, you execute your strategy flawlessly, but your opponent is simply a prodigy having the best day of their life and they beat you. How does the Stoic feel walking off the court?
Stoic walks off the court completely tranquil, and maybe even joyful because they actually succeeded.
They did.
Their goal was to play their best, which was 100% within their control, and they achieved it. The fact that the external outcome was a loss doesn't touch their internal success.
Precisely. By shifting the metric of success from the external to the internal, you completely eliminate the anxiety of the uncontrollable. And this completely resolves the paradox of the ambitious Stoic that you brought up earlier regarding the Roman statesman.
Right. I was wondering how Cato could fight a literal, bloody civil war against Julius Caesar and maintain his tranquility. If his goal was purely external, like defeat Caesar and save the Republic, he would be a nervous wreck.
Because war is the ultimate Category 3 event.
Weather, disease, troop morale, betrayal, it's all chaotic.
Yeah.
But if Cato internalized his goal, his metric for success was simply do my absolute moral duty to defend the Republic to the utmost of my ability without compromising my character.
Yes.
He did that.
Yes.
He achieved his goal perfectly. The fact that Caesar's army ultimately won the war was up to the universe, but Cato's internal tranquility remained intact because his goal was internalized.
That is the perfect historical application. And our sources provide a beautiful, elegant, ancient metaphor that encapsulates this entire concept. The metaphor of the Stoic archer.
The archer. Tell me about that.
Imagine an archer preparing to shoot at a target. The archer has absolute control over how many hours they spent practicing. They control the maintenance of their bow, the tension of the drawstring, their breathing, and the precise alignment of their aim.
All Category 1 stuff.
Exactly. But the exact microsecond the arrow leaves the bowstring, it ceases to be in Category 1. It enters Category 3.
Because a sudden, unpredictable gust of wind could blow the arrow off course. Or the target, if it's an animal, could suddenly step to the left.
Exactly. The archer can do everything perfectly in stillness.
So if the archer's only source of joy is hitting the bullseye, they're going to be a bundle of nerves every time they shoot.
But the Stoic archer finds their joy, their fulfillment, and their success entirely in the aiming. The mastery of the process is the victory. The effort is the success. Whether the arrow strikes the target or misses is ultimately indifferent to their tranquility.
What I find so fascinating about this is how deeply liberating it is. The common misconception is that Stoicism makes you passive. But realizing that the outcome isn't up to you doesn't make you lazy. It actually frees you to work incredibly fiercely hard.
Because you are no longer paralyzed by the fear of an uncontrollable failure.
You can launch a startup, write a book, or ask someone out, knowing that your only goal is to do your best.
It separates your self-worth from the volatility of the world.
That's powerful.
But it brings up a crucial follow-up regarding things that are completely out of our control. We discussed how the past is in Category 2, absolutely zero control.
Right. So if the past is entirely out of my control, if the arrow has already missed the target, shouldn't I just try to ignore it, repress it, pretend I never shot the arrow?
Not ignore it, because ignoring reality is a delusion, and Stoicism is fiercely dedicated to reality.
So what's the move?
We have to fundamentally alter our cognitive relationship to what has already happened. This transitions us into a concept that often makes modern audiences uncomfortable. Stoic fatalism.
Yeah, fatalism has terrible PR. When we hear the word fatalist, we picture a depressing, lethargic teenager sitting on the couch saying, whatever is going to happen is going to happen, nothing matters, so why bother trying? It sounds like nihilism.
The ancient Romans did have a deep cultural belief in fate. They personified it as the three fates, the goddesses who controlled human destiny.
Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, right?
Yes. Clotho, who spun the thread of a person's life. Lachesis, who measured how long the thread would be. And Atropos, who held the shears and ruthlessly cut the thread when your time was up.
Very dramatic.
But Stoic fatalism is not the passive couch-sitting nihilism you described. It is a highly specific surgical tool. Crucially, Stoic fatalism applies only to the past and the present moment. A true Stoic is never, ever a fatalist about the future.
Okay, that distinction is vital. We are not supposed to sit around passively hoping the future unfolds well. As we just established with the archer and the tennis player, the Stoic is actively aiming, planning, and striving.
Correct.
But how does this surgical fatalism apply to the past?
It operates on strict logic. Once a moment has occurred, meaning it is now officially in the past, or is occurring right in this exact, unchangeable microsecond of the present, it is deeply, fundamentally irrational to wish that it were different.
Because you're fighting reality.
Exactly. By wishing the past were different, you're picking a fight with reality, and reality has a 100% win rate. If you made a terrible financial mistake yesterday or said something cruel to your partner, wishing you hadn't done it burns massive amounts of psychological energy while achieving absolutely nothing.
But you still have to learn from it, right?
You can and should learn from the mistake to inform your future actions, which is Category 1. But you must be an absolute fatalist about the fact that the event happened. It was woven by the fates. It is set in stone.
If we look at the modern psychological equivalents, This targets the devastating habit of rumination.
Oh, rumination is a killer.
Human beings have this incredible brain network, the default mode network, which unfortunately loves to torture us. We lie awake in bed at 2 a.m., replaying an argument from 3 weeks ago, thinking, I should have said this incredibly witty comeback instead.
We'd all been there.
Or we torture ourselves over a career decision we made 5 years ago. We generate genuine physiological stress cortisol and adrenaline over events that are mathematically impossible to alter.
It's madness when you think about it objectively.
Stoicism demands that we violently cut that cognitive loop. We have to let the past remain the past. We have to embrace the present exactly as it is, warts, mistakes, and all.
Marcus Aurelius wrote about this constantly in his private journals, which we now call meditations.
What did he say about it?
He repeatedly reminded himself that the present moment is all we ever truly possess. The past is gone and untouchable. The future is a hazy projection that is not guaranteed to arrive.
So the present is it.
The present is a microscopic, fleeting point in time, and if we spend it wishing it were different, we are squandering our only true possession. To fight the present is to throw away your life.
The analogy I use to wrap my head around this is the weather. Imagine you have a massive outdoor event planned. You spent months organizing a wedding or a family reunion. And on the morning of the event, a massive thunderstorm rolls in. It is pouring rain.
A total disaster.
Now, you can stand in the middle of the field and scream at the clouds to stop. You can yell about how unfair the universe is, how the weather ruined your plans, how you are cursed. But the rain does not care.
It doesn't hear you.
It's going to keep raining based on atmospheric pressure, completely indifferent to your anger. The Stoic recognizes this dynamic instantly. They don't waste a single breath yelling at the storm.
What do they do instead?
They observe reality, they say, it is raining, and they immediately pivot to action. They put on a raincoat, or they start moving the tables indoors. The Stoic treats the unchangeable past and the immediate present, exactly like the weather.
That is a highly functional way to process reality. You adapt your actions to the reality of the situation, rather than throwing a tantrum and demanding that reality bend to your desires.
So dealing with the unchangeable past is one thing. Putting on a raincoat when it rains is relatively easy to grasp. But the real test isn't the weather. It's the other people standing in the rain with us who are splashing mud on our boots and complaining loudly.
Jean-Paul Sartre famously said, hell is other people.
He wasn't wrong. Dealing with the friction of society, the incompetence, the rudeness, the malice of others is usually the biggest daily threat to our peace. How did the Stoics handle the social world without retreating from it?
It's a critical question because, as we established, the Stoics absolutely rejected the idea of becoming hermits. Marcus Aurelius and Musonius Rufus taught that humans are fundamentally and biologically social animals.
We need the hive.
Exactly. Marcus used the analogy of bees in a hive. A single bee cannot survive on its own. It perishes without the hive. Therefore, what is bad for the hive is bad for the bee, and what is good for the hive is good for the bee.
So we have a duty to society.
The Stoics believed we have a profound moral duty to participate in society, to help our fellow humans, and to engage in politics and civic life. However, they were incredibly clear-eyed pragmatists. They knew that people are often irrational, petty, ungrateful, and insulting.
So we have a mandatory duty to serve the hive, but the other bees constantly sting us.
Beautifully put, yeah.
How do we engage with them without losing our tranquility? Let's break down the Stoic defense mechanism, starting with something very common. Insults.
Insults are a great test case.
Because in our modern era of social media, getting insulted by a coworker or a stranger online can ruin a person's entire week if they let it. What is the Stoic protocol for an insult?
The Stoic protocol for an insult is a brilliant application of pure dispassionate logic. When someone throws an insult at you, the very first step is to pause the emotional reaction and ask yourself a binary question. Is the substance of the insult objectively true?
Okay, let's say it is true. Let's say I am terrible at public speaking, and a colleague points out that my presentation was a stuttering mess.
If the insult is factually true, then why on earth would you be angry? They have merely stated a fact about the universe. If you are bald and someone points out that you are bald, getting angry at the truth is absurd.
So you just agree with them?
A Stoic would agree with the insult, perhaps even self-deprecate, and use the information to improve their public speaking if they chose to.
But what if the insult is completely false? What if a coworker maliciously accuses me of stealing credit for a project, and I know for a fact I didn't?
If the insult is false, then the person speaking it is the one who has made a cognitive error. They are mistaken, their map of reality is flawed.
Right.
And Epictetus has a golden rule for this scenario. You must deeply internalize the fact that the person speaking the insult didn't actually hurt you. It is your own decision to feel offended that caused the psychological injury.
Think about it mechanically, right?
Exactly. The words they spoke are literally just sound waves traveling through the air and hitting your eardrums. That is physical reality. The injury only occurs if you take those sound waves, process them in your brain, and actively choose to interpret them as an attack on your ego.
A Stoic simply refuses to make that choice. They let the sound waves hit them, and they drop the matter.
They don't take the bait.
You cannot insult me without my permission. That is an incredibly empowering framework. It completely takes the power away from the bully.
It makes you invincible in a way.
But I have to ask about the visceral physiological reaction. Logic is great, but when someone insults me or cuts me off in traffic and flips me off, the logic is often bypassed. My heart rate spikes, adrenaline floods my system, and I feel pure anger. How does Stoicism deal with anger once it's already sparking?
Seneca actually wrote an entire book-length treatise dedicated solely to the subject of anger, titled Denia.
He took it that seriously.
He recognized anger as the most dangerous and destructive of all human emotions. He didn't view it as a necessary evil or a useful tool for justice. He called it brief insanity.
Brief insanity.
Wow. He noted that anger is the absolute antithesis of joy. It destroys relationships, ruins individual lives, and literally burns down entire cities. To fight this physiological response, Seneca suggested a behavioral technique that sounds remarkably like modern cognitive psychology, the fake-it-till-you-make-it method.
How does that work in the heat of the moment?
When you feel the physiological symptoms of anger rising, your amygdala fires, your heart rate spikes, your face flushes, your jaw clenches, and your voice wants to rise to a shout, you must consciously and forcefully command your physical body to do the exact opposite.
Actively resist the physical symptom.
Yes. You actively force your facial muscles to relax into a neutral expression. You deliberately soften and lower the volume of your voice. You physically slow down your walking pace and your breathing.
Why does that work?
Seneca astutely observed that the mind and the body are a two-way street. The internal state often follows external physical cues. By enforcing a rigid physical calm, you essentially starve the psychological fire of oxygen. You diffuse the bomb by refusing to give it the physical expression it demands.
I've actually attempted that technique. When you are in a heated argument with a partner and you desperately want to yell, forcing yourself to lower your voice to a near whisper is incredibly difficult. It feels unnatural.
It feels like you're losing the argument initially.
But the moment you do it, it instantly changes the dynamic of the argument. It forces the other person to lean in and listen, and it physically prevents your own brain from escalating the panic.
It breaks the escalation cycle.
And beyond just managing our own anger, didn't Marcus Aurelius have a specific cognitive tool for dealing with the people who trigger us in the first place?
He did, and it requires a high degree of humility. As the emperor, Marcus Aurelius was surrounded by sycophants, ambitious traitors, incompetent generals, and annoying bureaucrats from the moment he woke up.
Sounds exhausting.
His advice to himself was this: when someone's flaws or bad behavior severely annoy you, immediately start focusing on them and aggressively pivot to thinking about your own flaws.
So if someone lies to me, I should immediately try to remember a time when I lied to someone else.
Exactly. Or a time when you acted selfishly, or were driven by petty jealousy, or lost your temper over something trivial. It acts as an instant ego deflator.
It breeds profound empathy.
You realize that you are not a perfect, pristine judge looking down on a flawed world. You are just another deeply flawed human being dealing with other deeply flawed human beings. It replaces righteous indignation with a sense of shared human frailty.
I love the empathy of that, but I have to ask the hard, pragmatic question here.
Go for it.
What if someone genuinely wrongs you? Let's say a business partner actively embezzles money from you, or someone sabotages your career out of malice. If I just smile, think of my own flaws, lower my voice, and forgive them, aren't I just being a doormat? Is Stoicism just a philosophy of passive submission to abusers?
That is a crucial distinction to make, because Stoicism is absolutely not a philosophy of passivity or victimhood. The Stoics were lawyers, generals, and lawmakers. They believed deeply in justice.
Okay, so they did fight back.
You can and absolutely should take vigorous corrective action. If someone steals from you, you report them to the authorities. If a business partner embezzles, you sue them and remove them from your company. If someone is toxic, you establish rigid boundaries and cut them out of your life. But, and this is the foundational key, you execute all of those actions without the toxic, blinding emotion of anger.
You act decisively but coldly.
You act logically, firmly, and justly. The Stoic perspective is that anger does not help you achieve justice. It clouds your judgment and makes you prone to mistakes.
Right, you don't want to make a tactical error because you're seeing red.
You refuse to let the wrongdoer steal your internal tranquility along with your property. You administer the necessary punishment or correction, but you don't drink the poison of anger yourself while doing it.
That makes perfect sense. Protect the hive, punish the bad bees, but don't let your own blood pressure spike while doing it.
Exactly.
And what about the flip side of the social coin? What about doing good deeds for others? Because if people are generally annoying and ungrateful, why should a Stoic bother helping anyone at all?
Marcus Aurelius addressed this with what I consider to be one of the most beautiful concepts in ancient philosophy: the imperative to do good without seeking gratitude.
How did he frame that?
He used a brilliant natural metaphor to explain human duty. He compared a human being to a grapevine. A vine spends all of its energy pulling water and nutrients from the soil to produce a cluster of grapes. But once it has produced those grapes, the vine doesn't turn around and demand applause.
It doesn't expect a thank you note from the person who eats the grapes.
It just produces them. Because it is the fundamental nature of a vine to produce grapes. A horse runs because it's a horse. A dog barks because it's a dog.
And a human being, as a rational social animal designed by nature for cooperation, should do good deeds in the exact same way.
Yes. We should produce our grapes, our acts of kindness, our public service, our charity, simply because it is our nature to do so. We do the good deed, we move on to the next task, and we don't wait around for the applause.
Because if you expect gratitude, you have just made a critical error in your operating system. You have placed your own tranquility in Category 3.
You've handed your peace over to someone else.
You have made your emotional stability dependent on someone else's behavior, their willingness to say thank you. And since you cannot control their behavior, you will inevitably end up resentful and disappointed.
The Stoic finds their joy entirely in the act of giving, not in the receipt of gratitude.
Just produce your grapes. That is a motto to live by. Okay, so we have covered a massive amount of ground. We've upgraded the OS to handle our own desires. We've inoculated ourselves against discomfort. We've internalized our goals, and we've learned how to deal with the annoying bees in the human hive. What is the final frontier for a Stoic?
The final, and unquestionably the ultimate tests of the Stoic philosophy are entirely internal and unavoidable. The final exams are the realities of aging and dying.
Wow. We are wading right into the deep end of the human experience now.
We have to. It's the ultimate test.
Ours is a culture obsessed with youth and extending life at all costs. How does a philosophy focused on cultivating joy deal with the physical degradation of aging and the absolute finality of death?
Our sources make a fascinating observation about the demographics of Stoicism. While it is useful for everyone, Stoicism is actually remarkably well-suited and perhaps most profoundly appreciated by the elderly.
Really? Why is that?
Think about the psychological state of youth. A young person, driven by a cocktail of hormones, boundless physical energy, and a lack of lived experience, might find the Stoic concept of mere tranquility to be somewhat boring.
Sure, young people want the extremes.
They want extreme highs, dramatic romances, and intense passions. They want the roller coaster. But an older person who has been battered by the inevitable ups and downs of a long life, who has experienced grief, betrayal, and exhaustion, recognizes how incredibly rare, valuable, and profound a state of unshakable tranquility truly is.
The roller coaster loses its appeal when your back hurts. You just want a smooth train ride.
Exactly.
But what about death itself? It is the ultimate loss. It takes you out of Category 1, 2, and 3 entirely. How does a Stoic not fall into existential despair over the fact that the ride ends permanently?
For a Stoic, deeply contemplating death is not a morbid, depressing exercise. It is the ultimate, most powerful tool for appreciation. It is the extreme, final version of negative visualization.
Is this what they call memento mori?
Yes. Memento mori, remember that you must die. The logic is that knowing your days are strictly numbered is the only psychological mechanism powerful enough to prevent you from squandering them.
Because if you think you have infinite time, you waste it.
The person who unconsciously acts like they have an infinite amount of time is the one who wastes their life doom scrolling on their phone, staying in a miserable career, or holding on to petty grudges. The Stoic, by keeping death constantly in their peripheral vision, lives every single day as if it could literally be their last.
They extract maximum joy, meaning, and presence from the current moment, precisely because they know it is a finite resource.
If we contrast that with how modern society handles mortality, the difference is jarring.
Oh, it's night and day. We have essentially sequestered death. We hide aging at all costs. We spend billions on anti-aging serums and surgeries.
We segregate the elderly into care facilities away from the daily flow of society.
We speak about death in hushed, uncomfortable tones, and we use euphemisms like passed away. And because we aggressively avoid confronting it, death becomes this terrifying looming shadow in the background of our collective subconscious.
We arrive at the end of our lives completely and utterly unprepared for the one single event that was absolutely guaranteed to happen to us from the moment we were born.
The Stoic flips that. They walk right up to the shadow, they stare it in the face daily, and by doing so, they effectively disarm the terror.
And we must remember that the ancient Stoics didn't just theorize about this in safe classrooms. They frequently had to face it practically and brutally.
Because of the political climate in Rome.
Right. We mentioned earlier that the Stoics were politically active. Because they held rigidly to their moral principles, many philosophers, including giants like Musonius Rufus and Epictetus, ran afoul of tyrannical Roman emperors like Nero and Domitian.
What happened to them?
They were frequently stripped of their wealth and exiled to barren islands. Sometimes, like in the case of Seneca, they were ordered to commit suicide. But the historical accounts show that they used these severe, terrifying punishments as the ultimate laboratory to test their decades of philosophical training.
So they didn't break down.
When the sentence of exile or death came down, they didn't weep or beg. They met it with the exact tranquility they had been practicing.
So practicing Stoicism on a daily basis, doing the minor negative visualizations about your coffee cup, practicing voluntary discomfort by sleeping on the floor, internalizing your goals in a tennis match, it is literally like putting yourself through cognitive fire drills.
Cognitive fire drills, I love that.
You run the drills when the stakes are low. So when the real massive fire finally breaks out, when you get the terminal medical diagnosis or you face the end of your life, you aren't paralyzed by panic. You are calm because you have practiced the evacuation route in your mind 1,000 times.
That is an exceptionally accurate summary of the entire practice. It is preparation for the ultimate tests of character.
Right. I want to pivot to the macro level because this raises a massive historical and scientific question. If this philosophy is so incredibly effective, if it gives us this robust OS upgrade to handle desire, anxiety, toxic people, and even our own mortality, why did it almost completely disappear for nearly 2 millennia?
It's a fascinating study in cultural shifts, really.
And perhaps more importantly for the learner today, how does this ancient framework hold up against the rigorous scrutiny of modern science, evolutionary biology, and clinical psychology?
Let's tackle the history first. According to the research in our sources, after the deaths of Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic school suffered from a lack of charismatic foundational leaders to champion and adapt the philosophy. But the most significant factor by far was the meteoric rise of Christianity across the Roman Empire.
How did Christianity displace it? They share quite a few moral overlaps, don't they?
They share massive overlaps in terms of daily morality, like treating others well, sexual restraint, charity, and mastering one's desires. But Christianity offered a psychological product that Stoicism simply couldn't compete with.
Which was?
The promise of a guaranteed, blissful, eternal afterlife for the faithful. Stoicism was a philosophy strictly for this life. It offered tranquility here and now, but made no hard promises about what happened after the fates cut the thread.
I see.
Faced with the choice between a philosophy that requires rigorous daily psychological effort just to be tranquil in a hard world versus a religion that promises eternal paradise in exchange for faith, the masses naturally gravitated toward the latter. Over the centuries, Stoicism faded from a daily practice into the dusty background of academic history.
And then, when secular philosophy reemerged powerfully in the 19th and 20th centuries, it didn't return to the Stoic model of how to live. Philosophy departments became obsessed with abstract logic, linguistics, and deconstructing the meaning of words.
They stopped being life coaches.
And simultaneously, modern psychology and psychiatry emerged with a fundamentally different view of human emotions, heavily influenced by Freud.
This is where the modern clash occurs. If you go to a standard traditional therapist today, a significant amount of the advice you receive is based on the hydraulic model of emotions, which is often the exact opposite of Stoic training.
A hydraulic model, like building up pressure.
Exactly. The prevailing cultural wisdom is that you must constantly process and vent your emotions. The theory is that if you feel anger, you need to hit a punching bag or scream into a pillow.
Let it all out.
Yeah.
That is the mantra of modern emotional health.
Right, because they believe if you don't express it constantly, the emotion gets bottled up like steam in a pressure cooker and will eventually make you physically sick or cause a mental breakdown.
How does Stoicism defend its practices against the accusation that it's just unhealthy repression?
It is a major point of contention, but modern empirical science is actually swinging back toward the Stoics. The Stoic counter-argument, which forms the entire basis of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, today, is that venting often doesn't release the emotion, it feeds the fire.
The punching bag makes it worse.
Yes. Psychological studies, like those conducted by Brad Bushman on anger, have shown that hitting a punching bag when you are mad doesn't make you less angry. It actually trains your brain's neural pathways to associate anger with physical aggression. It makes you more prone to violence in the future.
Because neuroplasticity means that neurons that fire together wire together. You are practicing being angry.
Exactly the problem. Stoicism is absolutely not about bottling up an emotion that is already raging out of control. That is repression, and it is harmful. Stoicism is about cognitive interception.
Interception. So catching it early.
It is about using reason to catch the initial spark of the emotion before it takes root and turns into a fire. It's about changing the underlying judgment.
So if someone insults you, you don't repress the rage.
No, you use logic to realize the insult didn't actually harm you. Because you changed the judgment, the anger never fully forms in the first place. There is no steam in the pressure cooker to bottle up.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
It's not repression, it's prevention at the cognitive level. But if we dig even deeper into the science, what about the evolutionary biology side of things?
Evolution plays a huge part in this.
Why are we so naturally prone to these negative emotions, the insatiability, the anxiety, the anger, if they ultimately make us miserable? Why did evolution build us this way?
This is where synthesizing Stoicism with modern evolutionary psychology provides a massive aha moment. We have to ask, why do we suffer from hedonic adaptation? Why are we never satisfied?
Right? Why do we always want the newer car?
Because for 99% of human history, that insatiability kept our ancestors alive. Imagine a prehistoric hunter-gatherer who was perfectly stoically content with the handful of berries he picked today and had no desire to gather more.
He would likely starve to death during the winter.
Exactly. Imagine an ancestor who wasn't constantly paranoid and anxious about rustling bushes. They got eaten by a predator. We evolved to be chronically anxious, obsessively status conscious, and permanently insatiable because those specific traits ensured survival and reproduction in a brutally dangerous, resource-scarce world.
So we are the descendants of the most anxious, paranoid apes on the savannah.
We really are.
But the problem is, we now live in a modern, relatively safe world. Most of us listening to this have guaranteed access to calories at a grocery store. We have locks on our doors, and we don't have to worry about leopard attacks.
That is the core of the evolutionary mismatch theory. Our biological programming is profoundly outdated. The software that kept our ancestors alive on the savannah just makes us incredibly miserable in a modern office building.
We are running a survival-based OS in a world that now requires a flourishing-based OS.
Exactly. Stoicism, therefore, can be viewed scientifically as a deliberate cognitive hack. It is a set of manual overrides designed to short-circuit our outdated evolutionary anxiety responses.
I want to offer one final analogy to encapsulate this. We treat a lot of our modern evolutionary mismatch with pharmacology.
We do, yeah.
Compare Stoicism to a modern anti-anxiety medication, like Xanax. Now, to be clear, psychiatric medication has its place. It can calm a severe physiological panic response.
Of course.
But taking a pill won't make you deeply appreciate the fragile beauty of a Sunday picnic. It won't give you the cognitive tools to empathize with a rude coworker. It won't make you a more courageous, resilient, or virtuous human being. Stoicism, as a comprehensive philosophy of life, cures the underlying anxiety, but it does so while actively enhancing the profound joy of living and upgrading your character.
It isn't a numbing agent, it is an enhancement agent.
That is the ultimate value proposition of the philosophy. But before we conclude, this raises one final, highly practical question for the learner. After absorbing all of this, should they walk away from this deep dive and attempt to become a 100% perfect, flawless Stoic sage starting tomorrow?
I would strongly advise against that.
I certainly hope not, because frankly, that sounds exhausting. The idea of never once losing my temper, always being perfectly tranquil and effortlessly accepting every tragedy seems impossible.
And the ancient Stoics completely agreed with you. They knew that the fully enlightened sage was a theoretical, virtually impossible ideal.
Even the masters struggled.
Oh, heavily. Even Seneca, who wrote the books on this, openly admitted in his letters that he was deeply flawed, that he loved his wealth too much, and that he frequently failed his own tests.
That's reassuring.
Marcus Aurelius' famous journal is literally just a private notebook of the most powerful man in the world, constantly scolding himself for slipping up and reminding himself to do better. Stoicism is not about achieving absolute perfection. It is about daily, incremental progress.
It's the trajectory of the line, not the absolute position.
Every single time you catch yourself getting angry at traffic and you successfully apply reason to lower your heart rate, that is a massive victory. Every time you actually taste and appreciate your morning cup of coffee because you practice a split second of negative visualization, that is a victory. It was a lifelong practice, a daily workout, not a final destination.
We have covered a truly massive expanse of intellectual ground today. From the bustling life coaching markets of ancient Athens to the neuroscience of hedonic adaptation. We've talked about upgrading our mental operating systems, the trichotomy of control, dealing with the hive, and running fire drills for our own mortality. What is the singular final takeaway you want the learner to leave with?
I will leave the listener with a provocative, urgent warning from Epictetus. He would tell his students, "The Olympics of your life have already begun."
The Olympics of your life.
You are in the arena right now. You cannot delay your training any longer, claiming you will start tomorrow or when things settle down. Every single time you lose your temper at a minor inconvenience, every time you waste an hour doom scrolling out of vague anxiety, every time you let a stranger's insult ruin your day, you are actively losing a match in the only Olympics that matter. The time to start practicing your philosophy, to start installing this new operating system, and to reclaim your unshakable joy is not tomorrow. It is today.
The starting gun has fired. What a powerful imperative. We genuinely hope this deep dive has provided you with a robust new toolkit to navigate those murky, unpredictable waters of life we discussed at the very beginning. Don't forget to follow us and subscribe to stay updated on our latest episodes and never miss a step in this odyssey of thought. Until next time, keep questioning.